Good evening and welcome to Gunner Shot. In this series of Chanakya defense dialogues, Klaus, Kasa, and Gunner Shot brings you the next webinar on Bangladesh and what the future portends. And joining me to discuss this subject are eminent people who know Bangladesh well and who are well up to everything. And as you see, joining me is Ambassador Gurjeet Singh, who needs no introduction. He writes so well on almost many issues which concern India and our neighboring countries. Then, of course, we have General Gautam Murthy, who's the founder of CASA, and he is there with me in almost all dialogues. General Vinod Bhatia, with whom I have discussed Bangladesh in detail and our neighboring countries in detail, who's been our ex-DGMO. And fresh off the blocks is General Pradeep Nair, uh, who's been the DG Assam Rifles, with whom I've already had a discussion on Bangladesh a couple of weeks back. Right.
Thank
Now,
you.
to give an overview of everything, and before that, actually, I must tell everyone, sirs, good evening. And it's fortunate that I have all of you, we have all of you to give your views. With this, I'll just set the stage by giving the basic matrix where Bangladesh is today. When, you know, the the monsoon revolution happened in Bangladesh 2 months back, a lot of chaos, a lot of everything, but things seem to be settling down. There were a lot of problems from viewpoints from Bangladesh and India. There was a lot of animosity up in the social media and all kinds of media. But things seem to be settling down. There are certain positive indications which are coming out. All of us at that point of time said India Bangladesh relations will be presaged on what happens during Durga Puja. There are a lot of apprehensions, and many of these apprehensions are set aside because Bangladesh has declared 4 days holidays for Durga Puja, and things are going okay, right? Then Professor Yunus very recently, in an interview, said that India and Bangladesh are interdependent on each other and have no choice but to get along with each other. He just echoed what our external affairs minister said a little time back. And that's the way it is, and portends well for India Bangladesh relations. And then, of course, a significant thing happened a few days back when there was an electricity sharing agreement or transfer agreement which happened between Nepal, India, and Bangladesh, where electricity from Nepal was being exported to Bangladesh through India. I thought that is a very positive way of moving ahead in life. But having said that, there is still a lot of flux, a lot of flux within Bangladesh. If I recount the flux points, there's a lot of debate within Bangladesh that they should carry out reforms and constitutional amendments before the elections. And the elections are not anywhere on the horizon. And that's a catch-22 situation because uh, without the due political process, I wonder how constitutional amendments are going to be undertaken by an interim government. Right. The business sentiment is poor. People say it's picking up, but generally it's not very great, and the economy is hemorrhaging, right? And there's no real plan in sight so far. The law and order has not been fully restored. Uh, you see in the social media a lot of cases of religious morality and street law being enforced, and some of them is pretty horrendous. Even if 70% of those videos which are floating around are discounted, 30% also is bad, right? And then there's significant power shortages in the country, and unfortunately, Bangladesh has been hit by floods, unseasonal floods, which hit Nepal recently, and they've now gone into Bangladesh. And Bangladesh being the tail end of the bottom riparian of all rivers, it faces the brunt of it, and they're having this problem. Right. If I look at it from a slightly different perspective, the opinion, makers who write in papers and magazines and all that, I still see them leaning away from India and going towards China. And maybe USA has not shown its hand so far. And I don't know whether it will, because these are issues which USA has got different views of, and whether China will make good and come in these are all in the air. But there's a distinct anti-India sentiment, despite the fact that at the governmental level there is a goodwill. So there is two tones coming out of Bangladesh. And last but not the least, I would like to mention there is a heightened sense of self-importance which comes out of Bangladesh. Having read Bangladesh now very closely for the past 2 months, this is what the current situation is. With this, we'll have each speaker put his views out for about 5, 10 minutes, 12 minutes. I'll not stop anyone, please. And then we'll see where it goes. If we have time for a second round, we'll go ahead. Otherwise, we'll take questions. With this, I'd request General Gautam Murthy, sir, please set the ball rolling. All yours.
Thank you very much, General Shankar. Good evening to you. Good evening to my fellow panelists. Good evening to our viewers. Jai Hind to all of you. Taking a cue from one of our viewers who said, let us for a moment remember one of India's greatest nationalists and industrialists who passed away today, Mr. Ratan Tata. And of course, we all pay homage to him. And since the morning, I think all Indians have been paying homage to him in some way or the other. A great role model for our nation. What does the future portend for Bangladesh? When the momentous political upheaval that took place on 5th August this year with Sheikh Hasina along with a close family having to flee Dhaka and take refuge in Delhi, Kasa and Ganesh held a webinar on 6th August itself, just one day later, to discuss what happened, why it happened, what is the kernel, what is the problem behind it, and how the future is likely to shape. And I'm pleased to inform you all, General Shankar told me that it received a very good viewership of over 12,200 people who have viewed that so far. But I will dwell on just the main takeaway from the webinar, was that India will have to accept that there are internal dynamics within Bangladesh that are at play, and that India at best can be frank and transparent in our dealings with whichever dispensation that comes to power. Basically, we felt we have to wait and watch. Now today, as we all know, a little over 2 months have gone by. We now revisit our conclusion and see where Bangladesh is headed. General Shankar has given a wonderful introduction and gone into a fair amount touching every aspect of what is actually happening. The interim government in Bangladesh, led by the Nobel laureate Professor Muhammad Yunus, as we all know, has made very significant policy decisions to stabilize the country amidst very serious political, economic, and security turmoil. Some of the key actions taken by him was, first and foremost, judicial reforms. He emphasized the need for comprehensive judicial reforms to ensure fair trials and justice for those involved in past political unrest. But at the same time, there are cases being filed against Sheikh Hasina and senior colleagues of hers. Where that takes Bangladesh, one really doesn't know today. But what is also important, that to control the unrest, he's given magisterial powers to the army for the next 2 months to enhance the law and order in the country. Social unrest within the first week of October alone, more than 7,000 people have been arrested in a bid to restore order. The last 2 months have been indeed quite troublesome for Bangladesh. Persistent protests in the garment sector over wages, we've all been watching, coupled with scattered but serious incidents of attacks on Hindus with attacks on temples. General Shankar brought out that even if 30% of the videos that are doing the rounds are correct, it is serious. Ethnic tensions in the Chattogram hill tracts have added to the interim government's woes. The government is actively working to manage this ongoing and festering law and order situation. In fact, the government is uh, is honest in its dealings and trying to do its level best. But as you know, it's the situation is quite unruly, and despite the army getting magisterial powers, there are still law and order is not up to the mark. Economic stabilization, the economy is very, very fragile. Though Professor Yunus managed to secure international support, pledges from global financial institutions, he, as you know, appeared at the United Nations General Assembly. But the domestic picture is far more complicated. Inflation is rising, unemployment, concerns over non performing loans in the banking sector. All, all, all this are hampering the government's ability to drive recovery. General Shankar mentioned floods. Heavy floods have inundated parts of Bangladesh. They have taken the toll. The financial sector is in very deep trouble and facing uh, serious instability unless reforms are swiftly implemented. There are efforts underway to reform the banking sector to prevent further instability, and you can't have a better man heading Bangladesh today than an economist of great renown, Professor Mohammed Yunus. Security measures, I've already told you that the government has empowered the armed forces due to the inadequate response from the police. But criminal elements are ruling the roost in certain areas which the governance has not touched properly. Election preparations, his central mandate was to lead the country towards free and fair elections after some required reforms. His government has outlined a number of ambitious reforms aimed at ensuring transparency, combating corruption in elections, and revamping, in fact, the entire electoral process. But the process has only now begun. He's formed 6 commissions for drafting the reforms proposals. On international relations, he's got full support, as I mentioned, from the West, particularly from the US. In fact, there are many YouTube videos and posts doing the rounds, blogs doing the round that he's a US stooge, etc., etc. And the US was responsible for bringing him in. But I won't go into that. Relations with China seem to be growing, as we know that Sheikh Hasina left China in a huff, and the relationships with both China and the US were pretty low during her tenure as the PM, particularly towards the end. China is a significant investor in Bangladesh infrastructure projects, and they will be watching closely how his reforms will affect their interests in Bangladesh. Now, insofar as relations with India is concerned, now this is a sensitive area. I will not comment on it, but I leave it to our distinguished diplomat, Mr. Gurjeet Singh, to dwell about it and to educate us on how he perceives relations with India going forward. Finally, in conclusion, all I'll say that the expectations from the people of Bangladesh, particularly among students and civil society and from the Bangladesh's international well-wishers, is very, very high. Dr. Yunus's leadership has brought hope to many, but with the slow pace of reforms, persistent security conditions, and economic stability, significant questions are being raised. However, for the good of Bangladesh and its people, let us hope that Professor Yunus and his interim government succeed in ushering a new democratically elected government that will work with for all sections of societies, especially the minorities, and that a new, peaceful, prosperous era will be ushered. That's all that I have to say. Thank you, General Shankar. Over to you.
Yes. Thanks a lot, sir. I thought you put across a few important points. If I recap quickly, look, a lot of expectations are there in Bangladesh. Will the government be able to deliver it? Is a question mark. And you also mentioned that this is an honest government trying to handle a bad situation. And the Bangladeshi history is not exactly smooth. It's been tumultuous. Right? They've had their wild swings up and down. We know that, so it's going to be a tough time. And I'd like to just mention that it's not only the army which has been given magisterial powers, even the Air Force and the Navy have been given magisterial powers a little later for whatever reason. And the most important point is that amongst all this, like you said, India will have to give space to Bangladesh to sort it out and wait and watch because we can't help them in their internal processes. And if there is a tendency on the part of many people in India to not, really take this into our frame of thinking. Yeah. With this, I'd request General Pradeep Nair. Pradeep, please go ahead. You've known Bangladesh pretty closely. You've been handling, actually, you've been headquartered just next to them. And I thought you had a pretty good idea of what's going on in Bangladesh when we last spoke. All yours. What is the future portent?
Thank you, sir, and Jayan, sir. To begin with, let me thank you immensely, sir, for having me over in this very erudite panel. And I'm really humbled being here with such people with great academic repute, sir. Having said that, sir, while the subject is what the future portends, it is essential to delve a little into the past, look into the present, what's happening, and then from there we possibly go into what's likely to happen in the future. So, some of the opening remarks that I would like to make is the centuries old linguistic, historical, and cultural connect that we have with the people in Bangladesh should not be lost sight of. They're very, very similar to us. The creation of the country itself, while most of us feel that it was in 1970, 71 when it finally happened, the point to remember is the baby steps for this happened way back in 1954 when the Awami League won 300 out of 309 seats and it upset the apple cart of the Muslim League, which came as a huge shock for them. Of course, the election results were nullified, and Sheikh Mujibur, who was then a very young and dynamic leader, he was put behind bars. So the creation of Bangladesh itself in 1971, while most of the time very loosely we say that it's largely because of the Indian Defense Security Forces. Yes, surely we had a major role to play, but there were many other players from India, and more importantly, the people of Bangladesh themselves. That should not be lost sight of because we need to value their sentiments. The shared land boundary, as you alluded to, sir, it's 4,096.7 kilometers, which is almost 93% of the land borders. The rest, 7% being with Myanmar. So the relations over this period of time from 1971 is largely seen ups and downs, largely ups. But there was a point also 15 years ago, sometimes in 2004, I recollect the then External Affairs Minister, Mr. Yashwant Sinha, saying that our relations with Bangladesh is at an all-time low, probably even worse than what it is with Pakistan. From then, of course, it's only been a very good story till the current situation that happened. But what I need merits attention is also during this period when our relations were very good was the concurrent rise of radical elements. And 1st July 2016, I will put as a turning point when Holi Artisan Bakery was attacked in upmarket Gulshan area of Dhaka, where about 28 people were killed. That showed what the radical elements there can do and what they were up to. But post 5th August, of course, the protests are there off and on. Sporadic attacks continue not just against Hindus but also against Shia. The Shia shrines and certain churches as well. What Jal Murthy alluded to about Dr. Mohammad Yunus, very well-meaning as he sees, as we all see, and he wants reforms first before they get into an election mode. And when it is reforms, it's reforms over a very vast canvas: the civil services, the judiciary, the military, the police, the economic reforms, election commission reforms, lot of them. So surely all this will not happen in a hurry. It will take some time. So this current interim government probably will be there for some more time. So coming back to the students' revolution, I wasn't there in that webinar of yours, but I wish to bring out 2 3 points in this. That um when it happened, it was not just about the quotas being cancelled or the quota system being introduced. The quotas themselves were cancelled by the Supreme Court in as late as July. So probably the student movement should have died down, but it didn't happen. What started as a protest went on to become a 9 point demand. Then it went on to a single point demand. Hasina's ouster and all that. And then of course, whipping up of anti-India sentiments everywhere. Sir, Jan Murthy mentioned about the state of economy. I would like to bring out certain statistics on this because that will gives an idea of what the situation currently is. Inflation is at an all-time high of 8.5%, sir. The debt to GDP ratio from last year has increased from 10% to 15%. The forex reserves are depleting under pressure. The garment industry has been hit very badly, sir. It's under stress, and four of the largest factories were burnt when all this commotion happened. The real GDP itself has slowed down to 4.6, 4.8%. There is a balance of payment deficit, budget deficit, declining remittances, depreciating currency, rising income inequality, which of course is true at many places. But more importantly, there is a growing imbalance in the energy sector between demand and supplies. So, from the Indian perspective, the lines of credit, which amounts to close to 8 billion US dollars, which has been given in 3 tranches over the past few years, this is an area of concern because all these this economic aid or this line of credit has been given for building up infrastructure and connectivity. And how we will be affected is, of course, the Khulna Mongla port rail link, as also the other rail link between Agartala and Akhodas. So that is important for us, sir. A word about the radicalization, sir. By and large, we say it is Jamaat, but there is need to understand it's not just one group. There are multiple groups. So in that you have the JEI, the UGB, which is Bangladesh, the JMB, the Hizbul Tahrir, and then of course the recent ones like the Islamic Chhatra Shibir, Ansula Bangla team, and some elements of LET and Ansar al-Islam. So that's what we mean when we say Jamaat. And they have had a very important role to play. Probably they even had a role to play in the current situation that has happened. Now, related to that is the Hindu exodus, of which a lot was being spoken of in the initial days. But thankfully, great assurances have been given by Professor Yunus. He has actually gone to the Dhakeshwari temple and met the chief priest, given assurances. That has, in some way, assuaged the feelings of the other Hindus who are there. He's reached out also to the Shias and the Christians, which is a very good sign. So my understanding is that the notwithstanding all these assurances, the Jamaat factions would continue their acts against minorities, and may possibly, as and when the elections are announced, they might kind of scale up the attack. So what are really India's concerns as of now when we look at it? The most important is, of course, the border security. In case there is an exodus happening, we have a problem there. And that problem will be in West Bengal and to a very large extent in Northeast, particularly in Assam and Tripura, where these concerns are very, very realistic. Then, of course, of China, it has been spoken of. I won't get into greater details about that. But it is also about the transborder water management. So we are aware 54 of the 57 rivers which are there in Bangladesh are coming from India. There are issues that are there, and then they have been speaking of this flooding that has been happened that has come from Tripura, which actually is not the case. But more importantly, Indian businesses, 25% of the garment factory or the industries are headed by, or owned by Indians. In fact, close to 300 companies in Bangladesh are owned by Indians. So, of course, that will be an area of concern for us. Now, going forward, what do I see insofar as the present state of the government. The government itself, like we are aware, is an interim government. There's no constitutional provision for any interim government. The provision is really for a caretaker government, that in case a government loses majority, the caretaker government is supposed to be in place, which is not the case here. It is then supposed to have elections in the next 90 days. Again, seems unlikely. So while there is no constitutional provision, but there is really no option given the peculiar circumstances under which Sheikh Hasina had to leave the country. What scenarios are likely going forward in so far as government formation goes? I would kind of stick my neck out and say there seem to be three scenarios. Which one of them will play out, one doesn't know. The first, of course, is as per the assurances that Professor Yunus is going, let's say the elections are held in the next 2 to 3 months, in which case Awami League really won't have great or any support to begin with. The BNP, Jatiya, mix of them, JEI, all of them, the Jamaat, all of them. But for India, that won't augur well because the relations are likely to be strained. The second scenario is because Professor Yunus is constantly be saying that for him, reforms come first before the elections. So if he takes, let's say, a year and a half or so for these reforms to take place and then goes ahead with the election, there is a likelihood that if the economy continues to do as bad as it is, then probably Awami League will get some traction again. But the third scenario that I think is that this interim government, and this is a plausible scenario as well, the interim government itself becomes a government by wearing a political code. They become a political party to essentially bring stability to the country and address all issues that are worrisome for the country. So if that happens, then of course possibly we'll have better governance and like Jal Murthy brought out, no better person to handle the economy than the person who's now heading the government. So the final note, of course, is like I would again totally agree with what Jal Murthy has said, that we should pray for the best for the country because after all our destinies are intertwined for various reasons. That's also. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Janal Nair. I thought you put across certain points very well. If I recount, if I say the rise of the radical elements is beyond Jamaat, and that's going to stay, and it's not going to change. And we all must remember it just takes 3.5% of a population or anywhere in any of the state to create chaos. And the radicals, I'm sure, in Bangladesh have more than 3.5%. Right. So yeah, economic imbalance of energy imbalance, all that you said. But what is interesting is the three scenarios you played out. You take any three scenarios, fit elections, fit economy, and fit the politics which go with it, and you'll see none of them fit into balance. Okay. In any of these scenarios, one is out of balance. And given the tumultuous history of Bangladesh, I dare say I don't think any one scenario will play itself out. So I see turbulence. I mean, this is my way of looking at it. I see turbulence ahead. But then we'll see where it goes. But I think you've given three scenarios which are pretty likely scenarios. Any one of these scenarios will get played out. What the outcomes will be, we'll see. So with this, I'll request General Bhatia, sir, your views, please.
Jai Hind, and thank you very much. Two very interesting perspectives have been given both by General Gautam Murthy and my colleague General, both of them are General Nair. I would like to be a little analytical and anecdotal both. Let me start with, General Murthy started Mr. Ratan Tata's demise. The chief of the Bangladesh army visited India, and he was so impressed with the Tata Storm that he went and ordered Tata Storm vehicles for the Bangladesh army. So when I went to Dhaka, it was so good to see the Tata Storm as the mainstay of the B vehicles of the Bangladesh army. So that was one part of it. And the second part today is the 10th of October. And 10th of October 1971 was the passing out of the first course of the Bangladesh War Course from the training camp at Murthy, which is in Siliguri. 61 officers commissioned on this particular day today. So these two things were there. And today we are sitting out here discussing Bangladesh and the future, what the future portends. 5 months or 6 months ago, we couldn't have thought that we were discussing Bangladesh future. Bangladesh doing exceedingly well. The economy was growing. The people seem to be happy. Sheikh Hasina, the Prime Minister, was back with a thumping majority, irrespective of whatever people may say. Our visit to India, visit to Bangladesh, visit to China, back. So that is all now history. Things have changed since 5th of August. Prior to that, but 5th of August, definitely things have changed. So what does it say? I happened to spend a couple of months in 2021 in Dhaka. While talking to the people there, what I picked up was very, very, very proud people. And what they said was, I'm a Bengali first, I'm a Bangladeshi next, and I'm a Muslim third. Okay. So I want to put this into context that the Bengali culture, the connectivity, culture, and commerce, India and Bangladesh, it is very deep rooted. I brought this out earlier also, the three C's in your on your platform, Jan Shankar, and I reiterate that because now you see things cooling down, and you see Durga Puja, despite all the noise which was made of Hindu genocide, things are cooling down, and that is what I think what Bangladesh needs, and it needs a stable this thing. So I'll jump straight to straight to the scenario which the future portends. I agree with General Nair in totality, except that I do feel that the Chief of the Army Staff, General Wakar Rahman, he does have a lot of say. See, let's also understand that Bangladesh Army also has a lot of legacy from the Pakistani Army, and I do not rule out a smart coup. In any case, Bangladesh itself, since 1971, 50 odd years or 53 years of history, they have had over 20 coups. The last one was 2012. Okay, so coup is quite normal in Bangladesh. And if Bangladesh Army has taken a cue from the Pakistani Army, a smart coup where the front or the face of the civil administration is there, but the real power lies with the army. That's how it is. And we had gone to Dhaka from the NDC, and while the Brigadier General from the Armed Forces Division was addressing us, he made a very, very good statement. He said, if we want something, I just pick up the file, and he acted like this. I put it under my armpit, and I walk up to the Prime Minister's office, and that time Prime Minister was Begum Zia. And I walked in the office, I put the file, and she signs it, and I bring it back. Period. So that was in 2006 I'm talking about. And if that is what we see happening today, whatever the face is, I think the real power still lies with the army. Now it's also said that General Yaman is in a way relative of Ms. Sheikh Hasina, and there are some whispers that there may be a coup and the former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina comes back. I don't think that is likely because the groundswell is totally against the Awami League and Begum Sheikh Hasina. So that I don't think is going to be acceptable. Though the right noises have been coming out from the army camp and the support to the interim government of the present interim arrangements are there. But we'll have to see in the near to mid into the immediate near term. I think the present system will continue, and what comes out of it. As for the future scenarios concerned, the three scenarios given out by General Nair, I think all scenarios are not good options for it. Right. So, and it is not. It's going to impact us because Bangladesh is our neighbor, and it's a very critical and important neighbor. And we have connectivity with them. We have culture with them, and we have challenges from Bangladesh. Right? Many challenges, less opportunity and more challenges. We also have to see that if a stable Bangladesh, a reasonably stable Bangladesh, is always good for India because let's not forget that the Siliguri corridor, the small Siliguri corridor, 20 kilometers wide, connects 8.5 states, 5.5 crore people, and General Nair would, I'm sure, bail me out. And having been the GOC 33-4, that is a strategic concern of India. Right? So when we talk of Bangladesh, we should look at the People's Connect and we should look at the connectivity issue which we have. So Bangladesh, the three scenarios are played out well, but the fourth scenario which I'm talking about is more likely with the army continue to control from the back end, but what the army says is likely to happen. And that is where I think India should start investing into the army to army relations, because we'll have to look after ourselves diplomatically. I don't know how we do it, but we'll have to do that. The Bangladesh army also, we have to understand, is the second largest importer of Chinese defense equipment, right? Military hardware after Pakistan. And they have a lot of Chinese. I think Chinese investments are in Bangladesh for 25 billion into the BRI. And with Bangladesh going, we have a problem with the BIMSTEC, we have a problem with BBIN, and we already have a problem with the SAARC. So that is the scenarios which we're looking at. So India will have to invest not only in the present dispensation or any future dispensation, but we should continue to invest in the people of Bangladesh. And this would be important because we'll have to look at not only the immediate near term, we'll have to look at the mid and the long term, where people are more important. And for that, we have to look inwards. For many years, we always spoke of the 71 war. And what General Nair alluded to gave little credit to the sacrifices made by the people of Bangladesh in the war of liberation. They call it the war of liberation. So we should recognize that, and their sacrifices were one too many also. And we are equal partners. We just supported the liberation movement, and that is what we did. And we should not take it only as, India gave us the freedom, and then we should not expect something back, and they have not paid us back. Well, in the long term, we had some, last decade or so, was very good with Sheikh Hasina. She's really looked after. So with the change in government, what does India expect? Should not accept, but expect. One, I feel the Indian insurgent groups would get bases there. Maybe the ISI support, maybe the Chinese support, and we should be prepared for an increase in terrorist activity in our northeastern states. And this especially is very important because northeast is important. It's also our bridge to our Act East policy to our people, and that is something we should start. We should start preparing for internal security situation along the India-Bangladesh border, which of course is the largest border. So we'll have to look at things going a little, downhill, even in North Bengal, in Assam possibly, definitely in Manipur, in Nagaland, Mizoram maybe possible again. So that we should be prepared for that. And we'll have to also keep looking at what are the leverages we have in Bangladesh. So, one of the things we alluded was 54. There was going from upper Riparian or middle Riparian to the lower Riparian state of Bangladesh, and again recollect when we had gone to Dhaka and met the foreign minister. The first question he asked us was, yesterday flew to Dhaka, and that was the month of September. What did you see? So that's very, very funny. What are you asking? What did we see? We saw Dhaka from there. And then he said, didn't you see water all around? So they are flooded in the month of September. We saw water all around, and they blamed India for the flooding. Even now, when the floods came, they squarely blamed India for the floods and the devastation and the death which is caused in Bangladesh by the river waters. So they always blame India, and India is a good punching bag for the politicians of Bangladesh, for the people of Bangladesh, and the anti-India sentiment has been growing. And how we address the sentiment will be another challenge for us. Another leverage I think we have is energy security. The energy needs are met by India, especially Numaligarh. The pipeline exists from Numaligarh right up to Bangladesh, and most of their petroleum needs are from food security, pharmaceuticals, other government industry, the ready-made government industry. It was long believed, the Bengali culture, and I must say that having served in Bengal for a number of years, especially in North Bengal, strikes are very common. Right? That's in the culture. Strikes and civil unrest is quite common out there. And but one thing in Bangladesh always said that whatever may happen in Bangladesh, in Dhaka especially, the ready-made garment industry will not be touched. And because that was the main economic resource which they had. Because in Dhaka, about 3.5 to 4 lakh people work in the garment industry. And for the first time in many years now, 4 of the factories have been burned. And the industry is back or is trying to get back to speed, but they're having losses out there, and they have been targeting basically the Indian industry. So that we have to see how now it plays out. The economic condition of we would like a stable, economically stable Bangladesh. So that is not. As far as new blood coming to politics, I don't know whether the new blood is. We see any new blood to politics, because politics are very muscle game, and the old people have the habit of keep coming back, rolling back one or the other. The two Begums have ruled Bangladesh for a long, long time. So, and both are now getting not so young, 75 and 76 years old. And though the BNP has already declared the next in hierarchy, which the Awami League has not done. And if the elections are held now, I don't think the Awami League has any chances of coming back. But if the elections are held after a couple of years, maybe because of the economic downturn and the people facing a lot of difficulties, you may find that Awami League has some say in it. And the actual challenge for India would be the Jamaat. We're talking about genocide, anti-India, anti-Hindu feeling, which is there, which is getting controlled. It's not controlled at least. And let's look at migration, exodus, which was the word which was used, but I will say migration because exodus would be exodus could be there, but I would say migration. If Bangladesh starts failing, we should expect again migration all along this thing. And we have 12 land ports with Bangladesh. We should keep them functional, we keep them open, we keep that trade going. So this is as far as initiative is concerned, and we should look at again the cost of repetition. Our key concern should be investing in the people of Bangladesh and investing in the dispensation which the people of Bangladesh vote for what they want. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. I think you put certain things in perspective, which things. You did speak of a coup which could take place, and the real power is with the army, and that is that latent power can come forth anytime. And I would like to add one more issue angle to this, that we should be ready to accept a few mutinies also, because that's also part of their culture, if I may say so. Right? The point about liberation war with Bangladesh, I think, is very important, which most of the time we in India don't understand. We must understand, as much as India did a great military job, sorting out the Pakistan army there, we couldn't have done it without the people of Bangladesh and without their desire to, liberate themselves from the yoke of, the Pakistan army. So I think we need to start looking at these things a little more from the Bangladeshi perspective, and then a lot of sense comes in. We'll talk of China, BRI, and all that a little later, because I think that needs to be put in perspective too. The important point you made was, given that Bangladesh, whichever way it goes at this point of time, it's not going to go in one direction for quite some time. It's going to be in this fluid direction for quite some time. So the chances of anti-India forces, terrorists, insurgents, and all taking shelter in Bangladesh with or without the assistance of Bangladesh the government is on the cards. And in which case, the IS situation in our, in those parts are likely to deteriorate, and this is something which we must, be aware of. And like you said, the leverages we have plenty. We need to start thinking of how to use them, rather than the main thing. I think one of the focuses of our foreign policy should be how to ensure that terrorists don't get a nest back out there. Because this is something new which you said, and we have not so far addressed this, or I don't see this in our discussions anywhere. I think that's important. We'll convey it to the people who matter. With this, I'd request our ambassador, sir, all yours. I would request you to focus much on Bangladesh external relations, as also India and Bangladesh relations, because those are issues which have not been touched so far. All yours, sir.
Thank you, General Shankar. It's been a great pleasure listening to such an erudite panel who has made some very important perspective laid out and very perceptive remarks. So I think when I was on your panel on the 6th of August, when we discussed Bangladesh, I think I had said what we require is strategic patience. And I think I said that again today. Why do I say it today? Is because I don't think Bangladesh has gone anywhere since then. And if we were to take any actions, we would get blamed. Because when they are in a weak position, it is always easy to externalize your problem. And for some reason, they always find it easier to blame India rather than blame China. This is the reality. Now, I cannot believe that China has better people-to-people relations with Bangladesh than India has. Yet, the reality is that the popular uprising is largely seen as anti-Indian. Even when the floods happened, people said India did it deliberately. So strategic patience, and I'm so happy that no unsavory statements coming out from the Indian establishment at all. Just doing normal diplomacy and letting Bangladesh sort itself out. It is very important that Bangladesh sorts itself out and becomes a stable political and economic country. Then, General Shankar, your question about how do we deal with terrorists finding space in the vacuum would be dealt with. But if they don't resolve their own differences, they will create these vacuums like Myanmar has. Myanmar is a problem for us because there's nobody in control in areas near us. Secondly, I think there have been two missed opportunities. One, the BIMSTEC summit was postponed by Thailand due to their constitutional crisis. Otherwise, perhaps there would have been a Yunus meeting with Prime Minister Modi. And the second was in United Nations, when Yunus came after Modi had left New York. But yet, Jaishankar had a meeting with the stand-in foreign minister of Bangladesh. I think we need to realize that this interim government is an extra constitutional body. And it is in India's interest that the constitution be defended. And I sincerely hope that the Bangladesh army would defend that constitution. If they don't, and the constitution is allowed to go in directions which are unsavory, that would be a major red flag on which, frankly, there is very little that what we could do. Supposing they ban the Awami League before the next election, calling it a reform. Not a happy circumstance. Reform does not mean ban. Perhaps reform means you allow everybody who was in jail to come out and fight elections. Now, either you get a solution like you have in Jammu and Kashmir, that the popular will comes out and expresses itself without violence, or it could go the other way, that anarchy could come back. But what is the legitimacy of an interim unconstitutional government imposing constitutional reform? This is something Bangladesh needs to consider, not for India to say. But this question they will have to answer. Secondly, whenever any election is held in Bangladesh, there will be an upsurge of anti-India rhetoric and campaigning. We have to be prepared for it. Third, Bangladesh actually believes that the reason of geopolitics can be diminished, at least for the moment. Therefore, there was a meeting between Wang Yi and Muhammad Yunus on the sidelines of the UNGA, and he was asking them to invest more in solar panels provide more. No promises, just as Sheikh Hasina got no promises of new external aid from China. Professor Yunus has also got no promise. That is the reality of the engagement with China. What does Bangladesh need today? It does not need more weapons. It needs more economic assistance. When Professor Yunus was in New York, he met the president of the World Bank, who promised him $3.5 billion, not to spend, but for restructuring the financial sector, the banking sector. All this needs controls. It needs regulation. And that is where the money is being offered. But this is not money which is going to enter the economy right away. It is going to take some time. I was talking to a friend just now in Bangladesh who has run the business, and he says business is down because inflation is so high that people don't know what to buy, what is necessity and what is not. And secondly, the taka is depreciating rapidly. And if it depreciates further, it has a major impact on the country's domestic inflation and the ability to import from overseas. How many countries will give you freebies to keep importing? Everybody wants to be paid. So this is something Bangladesh needs to put its house in order. You have, the other panelists have already covered the law and order situation. The police is dysfunctional. The Army, Air, Navy, Air Force are running like magistrates. This is not where I expected Bangladesh to be 2 months down the line. I expected better. But yes, we give them time. Now, from India's point of view, I think extreme disappointment at the way things turned out. But I think there is the reality of geopolitics, which cannot be forgotten. I think Maldives has learned it. Sri Lanka has learned it. Nepal learns it. Bangladesh, why do they think they would be special? That geopolitics will change for them. After all, they have the longest border, as General Nair said, with India. And another thing which Professor Yunus participated in New York was a side event, not well noticed in India. It was on the Rohingyas. And he was pleading 1.2 million Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, take them back. No reception to a common Muslim. But they are Myanmaris, they should go back. This is his approach. They can't afford to have Rohingyas. One country which could help them through on the Rohingya problem is India. Because we are opening talks with the powers that be that control Rakhine state and other neighboring states. If we are able to deal with them, we could help Bangladesh send back Rohingya like we could send back, hopefully. Now, let's look at the next thing. We have got Bangladesh connected to India in a variety of ways. One thing which happened during the Hasina period was this intense connectivity set up between India. You know, there is that pipeline which supplies diesel. There is this transmission lines. India supplying nearly 900 megawatts of power to Bangladesh, for which no payments are being made or small payments are being made. But you don't see a noise in India that we should cut off the power. And, you know, we appreciate that they're having the problem. And I think we'll go along. But all commercial ventures have a shelf life. You cannot say, I will not pay for 2 years, maybe 2 months. But this is where you need to adjust. Now, General Shankar, you mentioned, and I think General Murthy also mentioned, about this agreement with Nepal to have a trilateral power supply arrangement. I think a very good move. Firstly, it shows that India is working with Bangladesh as if nothing has changed. We are ready to, we are not stopping this because we think the government there is inimical to us. We're not doing that. We are actually speeded up something which had been pending for long with Nepal and allowed this tripartite arrangement. Now, please remember that this tripartite arrangement, which will use Indian transmission lines, maximum it will provide 40 megawatts in the 5 months of monsoon when Nepal has a surplus. 40 megawatts at peak by 5 months in a year, not rest of the year. And I just told you that India supplies 900 megawatts. So this 40 megawatts is big for Nepal. It is not big for India or Bangladesh, but it is the spirit behind it, which is what we are showing that we are ready to work with you. Perhaps in the future, we may have Bhutan exporting electricity through India to Bangladesh. This shows that on several counts, and I think other panelists have already mentioned them, road, rail, pipelines, electricity, port connectivity, there is a enmeshing of Bangladesh with the Indian economy, providing us access from India into the northeast. This experiment has failed with Myanmar so far, but succeeded with Bangladesh in the Hasina period. Now, when you have this in place, it is difficult. I mean, this is not the Nord Stream that somebody is blowing it up. These are all there. So, whatever the nature of the government in Bangladesh, the economic logic of connectivity is there forever. Now, if you look at the Taliban, totally inimical to us, we don't talk to them, but they want us back because of these kind of projects that we did there, for which the people benefit, the economy benefits. We are not strategically outflanking them. So the moment Bangladesh realizes that India is not trying to outflank them in any way, but will continue its engagement on the economic side, I think they will benefit. But they have this political transition underway, which has a anti-India tinge, partly because of India's relationship, with the Awami League, partly due to the nature of those who were suppressed and have come out of political hibernation, and partly the resolve of democratic elections, which always blames the neighbor. But I think we are playing our cards right. We are going about it quietly. We are not making a noise, not making an issue of Muhammad Yunus. Often he tries this megaphone diplomacy of laying out policy loudly. We're not reacting. I'll give you one example. He keeps talking about reviving SARC. He doesn't talk about business. Why? This is just being provocative, no? But I will talk to Pakistan, we must bring Pakistan back. Because he also wants to think about Pakistan as a balance to India. But please look at the state of Pakistan. It's a balance to nobody. Whereas BIMSTEC is something that India will sign. That's why I said earlier that had the 6th of September BIMSTEC summit taken place, perhaps the narrative would have been slightly different. So, to conclude, there is the reality of geopolitics, the reality of economic integration and connectivity. What we need is resilience. And the economic resilience of Bangladesh, as in Maldives, as in Sri Lanka, is not going to come from China. It will come from India, and if India takes the lead, I think there will be greater satisfaction. Please remember that Bangladesh trade is barely 1% of India's global trade. It is 0.5% of China's global trade. So please don't start imagining your importance beyond what it is. And you are more important to India than you are to China because of your geographical location. You will have, just as India has to live with Bangladesh, Bangladesh will have to live with India. And I think both sides need to show strategic patience and cautious diplomacy to take their life forward. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. I think you made some fantastic points. I'd like to reiterate those points. The most important point you made in the end, that Bangladesh needs to realize that, its importance to China is for China's view against India. It's a leverage against India, right? Whereas for India, Bangladesh is important for India for its sake. It's not against China. That's the first thing. Like what you said, we are interdependent on each other. Yeah, we need to show strategic patience. We have to be, let's say, I said, we'll have to wait and watch. We'll have to let Bangladesh sort itself out. But there's a consensus emerging today that I don't see how that they will be able to sort themselves out very easily, because they are in a complete catch-22 situation. This interim government cannot undertake constitutional amendments. If it does take constitutional amendments, when the elected government comes into play, what does it do? Do they have are they legitimate enough to undertake a constitutional amendment and carry it through is a big question mark. Then how do you have elections by banning one party or, taking one section of the society out? After all, at the end of the day, Awami League is a big party. It might be out of favor today, but tomorrow it will come back. So it's a big question which Bangladesh has to itself sort out. And for which I think the people of Bangladesh have to start realizing. And an important point you did mention is about the anti-India sentiment which flows over. And I go with you completely, sir. The logic of trying to revive SARC, which is a dead horse, is only to balance Pakistan with India out. And that's why probably Professor Yunus, for all the goodwill which we are trying to show to him, went and met Mr. Shahbaz Sharif in the UN. And like you rightly said, Pakistan doesn't know how to balance itself, leave alone balancing someone else. Right. So these are the major issues which have to come out. But I think one issue which I wanted to comment, which we have somehow not got into focus, but we said it in passing, China. And Bangladesh must understand that, the Hasina government, whether you liked her or not, she balanced China, other interests, and India out very well. And she was smart enough, that government was smart enough not to completely fall into the Bangladesh debt trap. Right? And it kept, though it kept buying arms, it kept allowing China to build projects in China. It was not completely bowled over by China. The way probably Myanmar has gone under, or Pakistan has gone under, or Maldives or Sri Lanka have gone under. It had, even now, if Bangladesh is able to do some bargain with China, it is because of the policy of the past. Now, to jettison that policy and embark a policy of China first and probably India out will lead you to the Maldives case of, for asking for a bailout. And that bailout can come only from India. And I don't see another thing. And I think Bangladesh must learn the three examples which you quoted of Sri Lanka, Maldives, and Taliban, who have all at one point of time or other, in the recent past, went away from India, more towards China. And when their time of need came, China was nowhere to be seen. I mean, you take the classic case of Maldives. The first visit by President Musu was to China. And he was promised everything there. And yet, when the time came, China is not on the horizon. And what Maldives needed is just a speck of dirt as far as China is concerned. But still, China didn't come forward. And I think there's a lot for Bangladesh to introspect and stop talking of SARC and things like that and see what are the things it can do with India. But then we can't dictate and be condescending towards Bangladesh that they should come towards us. I have no issue because the condescending, I've used the word condescending very carefully because this is one of the words which one of the Bangladeshis has expressed. We don't want to be condescending to Bangladesh, but definitely we will not shy away from showing a mirror to Bangladesh where it is. And what General Vinod Bhatia and and Ambassador Gurjit Singh actually have shown a mirror to Bangladesh to show, look, what your interests are with India, and your 4,900 kilometers is with India. It's not a single kilometer with China. I have also seen some foolish people writing that we have a maritime boundary with China. I don't know how they've imagined it, and these are Bangladeshi people. So these things have to be righted out the way I look at it. And I see that, we what the general consensus is, we need to have strategic patience. Let things go even worse before they become right. I mean, I get the sense is things will go bad before they become right. I'll not take any questions, but what I'll do today, a little differently, is take some views from Bangladesh so that we understand what those views are and how this thing are. It is not as if all is lost in Bangladesh. After all, Bangladesh has got a lot of good people and got a lot of smart people. And that is why their economy was booming at some point of time. So, and of course, after